Well, Ron and I weren't really planning to be on the same panel together, so this is a presentation that's different than I was really planning to do, because usually I just talk about Inviragen, so we'll see how this one goes. I guess a lesson for entrepreneurs, yeah, I'm a founder of Envirofit, and in our society, a lot of times credit goes to founders, but really one of the best things I ever did was hire Ron as CEO. So, know your limitations and find people that can do things much better than you can. And Ron's persistence through that journey, he told the good side of that journey, but there's been a lot of bumps in the road, and really appreciate it that he's on the team. So I'm going to talk today about opportunities. I blog at Bopreneur, and all this was done with irony a while ago, and now I meet people, and I go, oh, I know you from your blog. So I'm probably feeling like Ted a little bit, like this BOP thing in bopping and everything. It's maybe a little overused, but it is what it is now. So I'm going to talk about business models for prevention. There are a lot of different business models that base the period we're seeing emerge. This is one subset, and I'm going to try a new presentation. I'm also violating a rule. I always tell people, keep it really short, not too many slides, and I know there's some other former students in here, and I'm violating that rule. Chuck Yeager once said rules are for people who can't make up their own. So I also introduced myself as an unrepentant optimist, an educational arsonist, an infectious agent. So there's just kind of a little warning here for what's to come. As we do this countdown, maybe you could think of a young child or a woman that you know. So what just happened? That was 20 seconds. Ron knows me well enough to know that having me be quiet for 20 seconds is difficult. But in that 20 seconds, there are over 10 million people Skyping. Apple sold at least 60 iPods. 5,000 tons of CO2 were released into the atmosphere. 50 businesses were formed around the world. The USA created that. More to come. But for what I care about, 2 people died prematurely due to air pollution. So what's this? It's the 60,000 plastic bags that we use in the U.S. every 5 seconds. So we had to do 4 of those. And this also ties to the issue of pollution. Because it ties to this new math that Ted talked about a little bit, which is not only is the world's population growing, but suddenly 1 billion people who represent the number of people moving out of poverty in this period is we're going to have a middle class that's basically going to double. And those people have aspirations, whether they're for clean cook stoves, small automobiles, motorcycles. They tend to involve moving up the energy ladder, and they also buy stuff. And buying stuff's okay, but there's a lot of design challenges around the type of stuff they're going to buy. I encourage entrepreneurs to think about the pile that they will create if their products are just thrown away after the end of a fairly short life. So we talk a lot about design for the other 90%, and what I really get involved in is more designing the businesses for the other 90%. We have wonderful people. For instance, I see Jocelyn Wyatt, who works at IDEO, Paul Pollack at IDE, Amy Smith at MIT. We've got wonderful designers. I work more on designing the business models, and so that's what I'm going to try to keep my comments to. Really dangerous if I get into some of these other areas. The quote I was going to use today is from Ben Franklin: "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." Okay. It's an interesting quote. I had heard it a lot. I didn't actually know it came from old Ben. It came from Ben when he was working in Philadelphia, actually trying to sell fire insurance. Okay, so it was actually around an enterprise which to sell insurance, and at that time you had to buy insurance. Otherwise, maybe the fireman wouldn't put out. And fire at that time was not a public good; they were private fire companies. So it was a good idea to buy insurance, or your house might burn down. But it makes me wonder. If an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, we've heard this for so long, why are so many businesses focused on cures? Pharmaceutical industry. Are there businesses It should be focused on prevention. That would seem 16 times more efficient, just if Ben was right, like in the general overall. So my 4 goals are in the next, probably more like 15 minutes, that I'll talk to you a little bit more about the importance of business model innovation for approaching global health challenges, show a couple examples of prevention-based business models, and make you aware of what I think is a pretty powerful tool or two that might help you prototype business models better. If I do my job, I hope that I'll meet a 4th goal, which is give you more confidence that you can actually do something. I generally don't do a lot of public speaking. Generally, I say I only want to talk to young people. I want to talk to young people who might actually do something. So I have been told by the organizers that you are such people. So we've got these big global challenges: malaria, indoor air pollution, HIV/AIDS that we've been hearing about today. And one big question is, how will society face them? And maybe we will proactively identify, plan, and prevent them. Maybe society will do some planning and then wait and respond when they happen. Or then we just let them happen and then figure out what to do. Okay? And I find that people get really paralyzed when they put it in a societal context about greenhouse gases or HIV infection rates or whatever. And what I love is some of these panels I've been sitting in where people just said, yeah, that sucks, and I'm going to go do something about it. I was just listening to the mothers to my presentation, and Ron and I were talking on the way over here about this amazing scale that they did of basically using mentors, mothers that had babies with HIV and with babies who were negative, and how powerful a model that was. And the way they scaled up just dramatically. We hope with some of our organizations we can do the same. This is a, good, showed up, doesn't show as well here. This is a, since I'm a business professor, I need to have at least one 2x2, right? This is mine. I came up with it a few years ago. I keep logging it. The general idea is there are 2 types of things you can respond to, and some are better suited for business and others are better suited for government, so or charity. So at the top you have crisis, tsunamis, earthquakes, those types of things, and at the bottom you've got chronic problems that are going to be there tomorrow. They're totally foreseeable. Okay? And then on the left you've got the basic pyramid, and I just call it the top of the pyramid on the other side. And as you can see, if you move around this, in the upper right, you've got charity and government. So when you've got crises in the wealthier countries, charities and governments can step in, like the Red Cross, the CDC, and FEMA. It's a joke. And then on the other side, where governments aren't as functional, you tend to see NGOs, and this can actually be trouble in some of these countries, Haiti and Sudan, where really the government is now international NGOs, which are not either democratically elected. On the right side, at the bottom, chronic problems like pharmaceuticals, maybe Merck's program for river blindness, Toyota's Prius, so there can be for-profits that attack these issues. But where I want to focus is on social enterprises, which are looking at chronic issues like blindness or indoor air pollution, but serving poor populations. So innovations, how an idea becomes a good or service for some will pay. Okay? Academic. Okay. But a lot of times people talk about innovation in a lot of different ways. I just find this is a pretty good centering definition to get people to buy into. And if you're all scientists, you'll take your head up and down, pretend they're going, no, it's not. There's other things. And historically, the focus has been placed on technology innovation and process innovation. First, it was all about the technology, and I was like, oh, well, the way you make things, that's important too. But what we're seeing now is emerging more a focus on business model innovation, which is good because it gives me a chance to get out and talk to people. And entrepreneurship for tackling these global challenges. So you might say, what's a business model? Because business professors talk about them all the time, and MBAs do, and you might not know what they are, so I figure I'll just give you a definition of that too. It's how an enterprise creates and shares value. Now, a way an enterprise creates and shares value, they can split it in a lot of different ways, and both Michael and Ted and Ron all gave examples of that. So if I have an extra dollar left over after I sell product, I could discount the product by $1, so that would go back to the customer. I could take that dollar and pay it to an investor as a return on an investor, or I could give myself a raise. It'd be like increasing wages. It's just trying to keep it really simple. So it's not just how you create value, but also how you share that value. And social enterprises tend to share that value with society. The problem is that doesn't necessarily get measured very well. So one of the really exciting things we're finding with Envirofit is even though we're concentrating very much on localized indoor air pollution for that woman, we can actually sell carbon credits in another market. So we can, in effect, do what we need to do, even though we're not getting paid for necessarily cleaning up the air inside her house, and creating societal value. When we launched the business, Kyoto hadn't been passed. We didn't have that ability to monetize that societal value. It was, in effect, kind of wasted from the basis of the firm, the company. So how do you get a good business model? Well, I would say you design it. So that's what we're going to talk about the rest of the day.
And I also say it's very important to think about designing the network rather than designing the product. So Ron's discussion of the supply chain and the ability to manufacture large quantities and ship around is as important as that. It was a really beautiful picture of that. So this is an example from Thomas Edison, who's known for inventing the light bulb, but as Andy Hargadon has done in a great book called How Breakthroughs Happen, he actually breaks it out into the whole network that Edison had to pull together to actually make the light bulb work, right? Because if you have a light bulb and you go to plug it in and there's no place to plug it in, it's not really useful technology. Okay? So thinking about how your technology plugs into the existing networks. And I was really glad Ron didn't use this slide, because we both use this slide a lot, which is what Apple do, and that's kind of how we think about designing both products and business models. And Apple has a really nice example. These slides are really beautiful, and Andy Hargadon's a designer, and I borrowed them from him, so I told him I would tell him. So you can see his name up there. But this is the first issue of the iPod, the first version of the iPod. There is hardware, okay, and there are all things Apple had to do in terms of coming up with this new approach to basically a Sony Walkman, only with tape. And this is kind of the hardware side and the partnerships they had to put in place. But they also had the software side, so they had to think about how they put together the iTunes software and the iStore, and then relationships with partners. And then they added video, YouTube. They had to add additional content there. Then they thought, well, what if we added a phone? Okay, well, there need to be apps for that, right? So you can see, as they built through the technology, how they had to build the networks, not just the box. And I think that same approach to business model design and thinking about building those networks is what I hope to leave you with today. There are a few things that I think are important in designing a business model. The first is what I call the 3 S's. Is it going to have a significant impact? Is it sustainable? And that isn't just kind of the green sustainability, although we'll get to that. I'm concerned about that. But that means, can you make payroll? Does the entity can survive on a weekly and monthly and then annual basis? And then lastly is scalable, which Ted and Ian talked about a little bit. Those 3 lines, that's the triple bottom line, the green. People use them different ways. People, profit, planet. But the basic idea is an enterprise design should have a financial return. It should have an environmental return. And it should have social return or social impact. And this can get complicated, so I'll just bring it back to goods and services. So basically what an economy does is trade goods and services, right? That's what economists do. And yet I think those ideas have completely become untethered from basic words. So I just ask, are your goods good and your services served? It's kind of a shorthand way of thinking about what it is doing. Do you like this slide? I got it from Ted. So the point of this slide for me, and I'll let you talk to Ted about all the green boxes, but that there are these basic things you need to go through in terms of designing, and piloting, and scaling, and those are iterative, right? That means you keep going around these circles. You don't get it right the first time. Never happens, except in my magazine. And what I want to talk to you today is mostly about the design part down in the lower left. So we're looking at how you craft solutions with the DLP, which is what Ted talked about, and how you here. I like the idea of making yourself even significant, as well as the market creation pieces, because these are not well-built, functioning markets. They're typically underserved or unserved. So I talk about heroic design, and those of you who read my blog know that I don't really believe in heroic social entrepreneurs, but I do believe in heroic institutions, and what I mean by that is those that are that do human and environmentally regenerative organizations. So is this a business that produces cleaner air, cleaner water, health and justice? Do they find value in waste? Do they prevent pollution and disease? Or do they restore or regenerate ecosystems? Now, I know there are lots of other businesses out there that don't do that, but for me personally, those are the ones I want to get involved in. Okay? I got so much time on the planet, I don't want to waste my time on others. What I want to talk to you guys about today are these, the subset of working on how do you prevent pollution and disease. With a couple examples. The first is a company called Inviragen. Our what sucked there was the pharmaceutical industry was spending a huge amount of money developing what I would call lifestyle drugs. Okay? At the end of the day, erectile dysfunction did not bother me nearly as much as dengue, hand, foot, and mouth disease, chikungunya, malaria, tuberculosis. So those were the types of things we began to look at, because there was already some pretty big initiatives going on at the Gates Foundation. We tend to be outsiders. We were able to find a dengue vaccine, hand, foot, and mouth disease. And we looked at 3 different markets. So the core thing we were after was, how do we build a business that's a sustainable business, that has a significant impact, that's scalable? Go do vaccine development, which is expensive, but keep it focused on diseases at the core. And we found that there were 3 markets. So our whole model is basically, how do we use the travelers market, folks like us that travel these endemic areas, and the military to subsidize the other half. This is a traditional for-profit company. funded with biotech venture capital. Okay? It took us a while to bring them down, get them to invest, but the company did a Series A round about a year and a half ago for $50 million. We're just finishing up our phase 1 research in our dengue vaccine. We've got clinical trials in Colombia and St. Louis. It's looking good, so fingers crossed. You all heard about Envirofit. I won't spend a lot of time here other than to kind of say that from a big picture, the idea was always how do we make this a product that people want to buy rather than something that would be given away. And I know there's a lot of data I've been hearing today about whether it's going to make or pay for things. And with that, we need to move beyond that. And the answer is it depends. Some emerging ones, people that you could talk to around this conference that I think are doing some really interesting thing. EYES is designing healthy products for women at the DOP. I'm a former student at IBI, working on clean birth kits, clean water filters. I think it's a tremendous idea, and they're working on their business model. At lunch today, talk about that. Design That Matters is doing some really interesting thing with low-cost medical devices. I've also heard XOut TV mentioned several times today, so I guess that's the one where you have a urine stick that reveals a code that you can then return for cell phone minutes. If you're taking TB drugs, it measures whether you're taking your drugs. It's a way to ensure the compliance. One of the really unfortunate things about the T-bug is when you're on drugs, you feel better before you clear the infection, so people go off the drugs and then the TB becomes drug resistant. So these are product and business model innovations that I think are intriguing and are emerging. So I want to just talk briefly about a business model design tool called Tools, and share those with you. I'm just going to kind of give you really high level, and I hope that some of you follow up on this. So when I think about designing a business model, I think about kind of integrating the values of the organization, the purpose of the organization, social purpose, and value creation. And I talk about a BHOG. Jim Collins used to talk about big, hairy, audacious goals. I've changed it to big, hairy, audacious, worthy goals. Okay, again, back to that. I don't really want to be involved in coming up with the next pesticide that won't disappear for years or decades. There's 2 questions every audience needs to ask. The first is what sucks. The second is what am I going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? We talk about the prices. The process we go through in terms of searching what Ted calls the design part of the process. A lot of prototypes and iterations, both the product, but also the business model. We use a tool called the Business Model Generation Canvas. Testing hypotheses. There's a great book about customer development pivots and lean startup that a guy named Steve Blank out of Stanford's been doing a lot with. He's got coming out on this. And then this concept of a minimum viable product. In other words, what's the basic product you can do? Let's sort out all the bells and whistles. We can test it and see if it's really going to work before we get too far down the road. So the first one I like to use is what I call the Venture 100 from the Matrix. And that's 100 words on what your venture is going to do and why it's important. And then setting up 3 metrics over 5 years. I don't really care what there are other people in this conference that believe deeply that selecting those metrics is important. I think you should pick 3 that are important to you and see how you do. This is one approach to business model design. Right? Yeah. So there's a step in the middle that a miracle occurs, and I see a lot of these. But I think the better approach is something called the Business Model Canvas, and this is in this book, Business Model Generation, by Alex Osterwald, that came out last fall. So the general idea behind this is to break up the business model into 9 pieces. On the right side are customers and channels and relationships. They all drive the revenue side of the business. So how do you make money coming in? And the other side is the resources and the human capital and the activities that you're going to do and what your key costs are, your key partnerships, and those are going to drive your costs. And breaking it down into these 9 pieces, you begin to get people to focus on what's important. And then there's this kind of overlay of these boxes. And so what you do is take a piece of paper, print these off the internet, an internet tool that you can use. We can begin to brainstorm these 9 different blocks or subsegments. Your team and begin to identify where are our challenges. You can do this pretty easily. You can use yellow sticks. So here's an example of that iPod that we were talking about a little while ago. So as an example, they decided if we put right to left, it needs to be mass market. In terms of customer relationships, there's having switching costs involved. Are they already using another way to store their music? In terms of channels, retail stores, Apple stores, and online. The middle is the value proposition, which is a seamless music experience. And then on the left side, different kinds of pieces that go into that, which are key partnerships and key activities. What is it Apple does and what is it other organizations in their supply chain? And this all pulls together, but it allows you to begin to go a little bit deeper on what is your business model. And then if you want to get cool and fancy, you got a friend who's a designer who draw little things like that I don't know, are visually attractive. And you create a lot of designs. This is a picture from Alex's book, just showing this concept of multiple iterations of business model design and testing this, okay? Just as you test a product, just test the product, go, oh, it looks nice, take it out, tell people, what do you think? How would you use it? And then you need to test. So every block of your campus has a bunch of guesses, and you need to get out of the building, talk to customers. It isn't fun, and in this space it's much harder. You know, for me to test a product in New Haven, Connecticut is much easier for someone that looks like me and talks like me than to go to rural India, go to rural Ghana. There's a lot of work. I'd encourage you to read Paul Pollack's book, Out of Poverty, if you want to kind of get some good ideas. Again, Jocelyn's firm has ideas, put up a number of resources. Catapult Design is doing some work in this area. So there's more and more ways to learn from others that you don't have to you can develop your own scar tissue for your own faults. I'll leave you with a thought. This is from Paul Graham, who has done a lot of work in student-based startups. And I love this quote. Most people look at a company like Apple and think, how could I ever make such a thing? Apple's an institution, and I'm just a person. Every institution was at one point just a handful of people in a room deciding to start something. Institutions are made up. They're made up by people no different from you. So I hope in this 18 minutes that I've given you some examples, I've given you some ideas, I've given you some tools that make you think that you can walk out of here and start something and do something different than when you walk into the session. And to help you do that, have a minute? Have a minute? Okay. So I'm going to make an offer. If any of you are about to go do something and you would like a little consulting on business model design, I will offer 1 hour of free consulting to anyone now who will raise their hand in front of everybody else and say they're going to do it. You, sir. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Come up and give me your cards afterwards, and we'll figure out how to make that happen. Thank you. And I hope that everybody here will applaud these brave people for trying to start business models.